You're going to jail for this." That's what Alara Vance screamed at me, the new HOA tyrant. While 45 families stood sweating in their driveways under a relentless 91-degree heat, their entire neighborhood choked in sudden, stifling silence. But empty threats don't scare me, especially when I know, absolutely know, I'm not the one breaking the law. She tried to bully me off land my family had owned for 47 years, long before her little HOA, Cypress Creek Estates, even existed, and then, as a ridiculous punishment for my defiance, she had deliberately cut my power line. What she didn't realize was that when she tampered with my simple residential electrical service, she had inadvertently shut down the entire utility substation that powered her whole, precious development. Now, in the stark, visceral silence of the heat, everyone could see exactly who controlled the critical infrastructure keeping her little kingdom running. Have you ever watched someone discover, in real time, that their assumed authority and actual legal ownership are two completely different things? Drop a comment, because this situation escalated faster than anyone expected, and it started, as always, with a piece of paper. The envelope sat in my mailbox like a coiled snake, thick cream-colored paper with the Cypress Creek Estate seal embossed in serious red wax. I'd just poured my Monday morning coffee, standing at the kitchen window, watching the mist rise off the lake the way it had every summer morning since I was 8 years old. The same view my grandfather had watched for 30 years before me. That envelope, sitting there so innocently, was about to ruin the peace I'd worked so hard to rebuild after moving back here. I opened it right there by the mailbox, still holding my mug. The words "Notice of Violation, Unauthorized Path Usage" screamed across the top in bold capitals. Apparently, I was in violation of HOA regulations for using the unauthorized footpath to access the lake instead of the designated community access point located half a mile down the shore. The fine was $500, payable within 14 days. Continued violation, it warned, would result in appropriate legal action. The letter was signed by Alara Vance, HOA president, with a dramatic flourish that took up 3 unnecessary lines. I stood there for a long moment. The footpath they were talking about was the same worn trail I'd walked thousands of times as a kid, the one my grandfather, Marcus Vance, cleared when he first bought the 5-acre lot back in June 1978. 2 generations had walked it before any HOA even existed, and now they wanted to erase it with a $500 fine. The thing about working as a document conservator, which is what I did for a living, is that you develop a deep respect for provenance, the chain of ownership and authenticity that proves something is real. I spent my days restoring centuries-old manuscripts, verifying signatures, and cross-referencing dates. When someone makes a claim about ownership or rights, my first instinct isn't anger. It's to check the paperwork. So, instead of calling Alara and shouting, I walked back inside, set down my coffee, and went straight to the fireproof filing cabinet in my study. The deed was exactly where I'd filed it, preserved in an archival sleeve. The text was perfectly legible. 5 acres, waterfront access included, purchased by Marcus Vance, June 12, 1978. I pulled out the cadastral survey map next. The footpath Alara claimed was unauthorized ran entirely within the borders of my land. It didn't even come close to the community property line. I sat at my desk and stared at those documents. The HOA had been formed in 2010 when a developer bought up the surrounding parcels and built 45 identical houses. My grandfather had refused to sell, and the HOA charter was drawn up without any input from the one family who'd actually been here first. Alara had taken over as president about 2 years ago, and she treated the position like she was governing a small nation. I'd ignored her petty violation notices before. My grass was an inch too tall, my shutters the wrong shade of green, but this one was different. This wasn't about mailbox height. This was about access to the lake, trying to erase history because it didn't fit neatly into her color-coded spreadsheet. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Iris Peton's number, my college friend who ended up in real estate law. She understood that sometimes the law was about more than just current statutes. It was about respecting what came before. I explained the situation, and she told me to come by that afternoon with everything I had. I spent the rest of the morning organizing my documents chronologically, cross-referenced, each piece of evidence supporting the next. The original deed, the survey report from 1978, the updated survey from 2015, photographs of the footpath, the old oak tree at the path's entrance. Everything labeled, dated, and arranged into a single, airtight record, clear enough for any court to see the truth. I also couldn't help but notice the iron fence behind my house. It enclosed a small plot, maybe 40 feet square, where the utility company's small substation sat, humming its steady, hypnotic buzz. My grandfather used to say, "Just because something serves the community doesn't mean the community owns it." I knew then that the fight wasn't just about a footpath. It was about the fence plot behind my house, the one with the transformer and the thick cables running underground, a story I hadn't needed to tell yet. Iris's office smelled like fresh coffee and old leather. I laid out the documents in sequence. She leaned forward, her finger tracing the property lines on the map. "This is clean," she said, tapping the survey map. "Your property line extends 15 feet past where that footpath runs. The HOA doesn't have any legal basis to restrict your access." She flipped to the violation notice. "They're citing community regulations drafted in 2010, but those regulations can't supersede property rights established 3 decades earlier. It doesn't work that way. So, they can't enforce the fine? Not legally, no? But that doesn't mean they won't try to make your life difficult." Alara Vance has a reputation. She uses the threat of legal action to keep people in line, but she rarely follows through because her position isn't as strong as she pretends it is. With you, though, she picked the wrong fight. Your property predates the HOA. You're not even technically bound by their charter. My grandfather refused to sign anything when the development went in. He thought HOAs were bureaucratic nonsense. Smart man, Iris smiled. "Here's what we do. I'll draft a formal response, citing the deed and the property law statutes. We'll send it certified mail, and we'll CC it to the entire HOA board. Let's make sure she has witnesses to her overreach." I wanted to believe that once she saw the documentation, she'd fold. But something about the aggressive flourish of her signature made me think she wasn't the type to fold easily. Still, establishing the legal record was the first step. I drove back, documented the footpath meticulously, and stopped at Mr. Clement's place. He was 71, one of the few neighbors who remembered the area before the development. When I explained what the HOA was doing, his face darkened. "That's ridiculous. Your grandfather's trail was already worn out by then. He used to invite the whole neighborhood down to fish off his dock." Alara's rewriting history. He agreed to write and sign a witness statement immediately. That night, Iris sent over the draft response. Precise, calm, and firm. I approved the letter, and Iris promised to have it sent out certified mail first thing in the morning. I sat on my back porch, listening to the steady hum of the substation. Just because something serves the community doesn't mean the community owns it. The question was whether Alara would push hard enough to make me tell that other story. I woke up to darkness. Not the gentle pre-dawn darkness, but the heavy, silent darkness that comes when electricity simply vanishes. 6:43 a.m. and 92 degrees forecasted for the day. My stomach dropped. I knew what had happened. I went outside. The breaker box was fine. The problem wasn't inside my house. I headed to the fenced area behind the house. The gate hung open. The lock cut clean through. My $3,000 backup generator was gone. Only oil stains and fresh tire tracks remained. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. The cut lock, the empty pad, the tire tracks. Then I went inside and found the second envelope, shoved through my mail slot. The HOA letterhead was the same. Due to continued violations and willful defiance of community standards, it read, "The board has authorized the temporary suspension of utility services until such time as compliance is achieved. Your unauthorized generator has been removed." I read it twice, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't just escalation. This was theft and illegal utility interference. Alara had gone from sending threatening letters to committing crimes. I called the utility company first. The rep sounded confused. "Sir, according to our records, your service line is active." Then I called Iris. "That's felony theft," she said immediately. "The generator alone is over 1,000, which puts it in serious criminal territory. And cutting your power, that's utility interference." They documented their own crime. "Here's what we do," Iris commanded. "File a police report immediately. I'll draft an emergency motion for a restraining order and file it today. We'll make them regret this." I sat in the growing heat, thinking. The police report would take time. The restraining order might just make Alara more defensive. I needed leverage. Something that would make her understand immediately and completely that she'd made a catastrophic mistake. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out the different folder. The land lease agreement between my grandfather and the utility company, dated 1995. The utility company had leased the small plot on my property for 99 years to place the substation that served the entire 45-home Lakeside Meadows development. I retained ownership and the right to request modifications or maintenance with appropriate notice. I had the utility company's direct line. I called the regional operations manager. "I need to schedule routine maintenance on the substation," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'd like to schedule a shutdown for next Saturday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Standard safety inspection." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a hot day forecasted. You understand that will affect service to the entire development, 45 residences?" "I understand," I said. "That's why I'm giving you the required 48-hour notice. I'll handle informing the residents." He agreed. He would need my signature on the landowner consent for maintenance shutdown form. I sat there in the heat of my powerless house. 45 families would lose electricity for 9 hours on one of the hottest days of summer. It felt cruel, but Alara had made that same calculation when she cut my power. She'd done it to punish one person. Maybe it was time the other 44 families understood exactly what kind of person they'd empowered. The authorization form arrived. I signed it on archival paper and emailed it back. The key phrase in their reply: "We'll follow your lead." I wrote a notice that was factual yet impossible to ignore. Scheduled maintenance notice. Routine inspection of privately owned electrical substation. Saturday, July 18th, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Power to Cypress Creek Estates will be temporarily unavailable. Authorized by Holden Vance, landowner. I mailed certified copies to all 45 homes. My lawyer called, saying Alara's attorney was threatening to sue me for harassment. She cut my power and stole my generator, but I'm the one harassing her? Is it retaliatory? Iris asked. Or is it educational? There's a difference. It's educational, I affirmed. Just make sure you have every piece of documentation in order. I reached out to the local reporter covering HOA disputes. I sent him a brief email about an interesting story developing this Saturday. He responded immediately. I wrote the email that would go out to all residents immediately after the shutdown, starting with a simple timeline. HOA sends violation notices for paths on my property. I respond with proof of ownership. HOA retaliates by cutting my power and stealing my generator. I exercise my legal rights as landowner of the substation that powers the entire neighborhood. I ended with, "This shutdown is a reminder that the infrastructure you rely on isn't controlled by your HOA. It's controlled by private property rights that predate your homes by decades." Friday afternoon, Alara called, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "You think you're clever. This little stunt you're pulling tomorrow, it won't work. Ms. Vance, I'm conducting routine maintenance on private property. I've followed all legal requirements. If you have concerns, I suggest you ask your attorney about the criminal charges for theft and utility interference that are currently being investigated." She hung up without responding. I went to bed early that night. By the time tomorrow was over, everyone here was going to understand exactly who held the real power. Early Saturday morning arrived, hot and clear. The utility crew pulled up at 7:45 a.m. 3 trucks, 6 technicians. The operations manager shook my hand. 8:15 a.m., a small crowd had gathered in their driveways, watching the utility trucks. Mr. Clement stood near the edge of my property, arms crossed, a small smile on his weathered face. The reporter, camera already recording, was there. At 8:32 a.m. exactly, I nodded. The technician pulled the main disconnect lever. The substation's hum died, and 45 houses went dark and silent all at once. The change was immediate and visceral. The reporter approached. "Mr. Vance, can you explain what's happening here?" "I'm exercising my rights as property owner to conduct routine maintenance on the electrical substation located on my land. But you should ask the HOA president that question. 6 days ago, she had my power cut and my generator stolen in retaliation for asserting my property rights. Perhaps she can explain why she thought it was acceptable to leave one resident without electricity, but finds it unacceptable when the same situation affects everyone else. I have documentation of everything." At the edge of the crowd, Alara pushed through with Edgar behind her, face flushed. "This is outrageous," she shouted. "You can't cut power to the whole neighborhood just because you're angry." "I'm not angry, Ms. Vance," I faced her calmly. "This is a lawful maintenance shutdown on private property, land your HOA has no authority over. Everyone deserves to know who truly owns the infrastructure powering their homes." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Wait, you own the substation. She cut your power first?" Clement stepped forward, voice steady. "That's right. She overstepped, and everyone knows it." Phones were recording, the reporter's camera rolling. Her authority was unraveling in real time. "We'll sue you for every cent," Alara shrieked. I raised my phone. "Go ahead. I have the utility authorization, the lease proving ownership, the theft report, and every certified notice. Everything here is legal. Can you say the same?" She turned and stormed off, Edgar trailing behind. By noon, the story was online. By evening, the news. The utility crew finished their work, and at 5 p.m., the lights returned, and the lesson was clear. Monday morning, the local paper ran the story on the front page. HOA president accused of illegal retaliation against resident. Tuesday, a county inspector arrived at my door and spent 2 hours walking him through the documentation. He confirmed they had received 3 other resident complaints about Alara's overreach in the past 6 months. My lawyer called with an update. "The police found your generator in a storage unit rented by Edgar. He's claiming Alara told him it was HOA property. The problem is they documented the theft in writing. That letter claiming they'd removed your unauthorized generator. That's evidence of conspiracy. The district attorney's office is reviewing criminal charges." That afternoon, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The community center was packed. Alara called the meeting to order, trying to maintain rigid composure. "Recent actions by one resident have undermined our mission." "Are you talking about the power shutdown?" a woman asked. "Because I got an email with documentation that tells a different story." Mr. Clement stood up. "She overstepped, and everyone knows it. You never had authority over his land." I stepped forward. "Miss Vance, your charter was drafted in 2010. My family's deeds are from 1978. Property law is clear. You can't retroactively claim authority over land that predates your existence." The meeting devolved. Residents demanding accounting of HOA funds, calls for Alara and Edgar to resign. By 8:30 p.m., a vote was called. 38 residents out of 40 present voted no confidence in Alara and Edgar. The board was dissolved. Alara stood, gathered her papers, and walked out without a word. 2 weeks after the emergency meeting, Alara appeared at my door. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I came to apologize," she said finally. "I stole your property. I cut your power. I did it because the HOA was the only thing I had left after I retired. And somewhere along the way, I stopped leading and started controlling." She looked up at me. The shutdown. Watching all those people come outside confused and angry. That's when I finally understood. You weren't being vindictive. You were showing everyone, including me, that authority doesn't mean power. "Ms. Vance, I didn't want to destroy your life," I told her. "I wanted to stop you from destroying mine." She apologized publicly at the next meeting, announcing she would refund every questionable fine she'd issued in the past 3 years from her own money. She then announced she was leaving Cypress Creek Estates. The new temporary board presented proposed reforms: a rotating presidency with 6-month term limits, monthly financial reports posted online, and most importantly, a recognition that properties predating the HOA remained outside its jurisdiction unless owners voluntarily joined. The vote was unanimous. The utility company reached out with a contract renewal offer, $30,000 annually for the substation easement. I proposed splitting it, $20,000 to a community emergency fund, $10,000 to me. The board accepted immediately. 3 weeks after the meeting, Alara moved out. I watched the moving truck from my kitchen window, feeling something complicated. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that justice had been served without cruelty. 6 months later, the neighborhood felt different. No violation notices had been issued in 6 months. Mr. Clement was serving as the rotating president. My morning routine had settled into something peaceful. I'd teach the neighborhood kids how to fish off the dock, the same way my grandfather taught me. Real power, I realized, is knowing and respecting what's truly yours and teaching others to do the same. So, if you ever find yourself standing on your porch, holding a letter that doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. Don't let fear sign for you. The land remembers who stood up for it. Thanks for watching. Share this video with someone who loves a good plot twist, and let me know in the comments if you think the HOA deserved to lose their power completely.